This podcast was created as a part of Podcast Lab by India Film Project in association with Anchor by Spotify.
I think for me, writing is something that is both fun and therapeutic. Like, if you want to be a writer, you should enjoy doing it and you should be having fun with the entire process because it can be fun. Of course, it's work, but it's also something that's very enjoyable if you're doing it in a style that's true to yourself. And for me, writing is a form of play, which means that it's kind of like a game for me. Like I have these ideas, I have these events, I have um, these thoughts, these feelings that I'm trying to like string together. And it feels a little bit like putting a puzzle together, right? You have all these pieces, they're not in order, but you know that they're going to fit together and that they're going to make a picture at the end of it. And how you do that, how you organize that, there's no one way to do it, there's no one process to do it. But it is in itself a very rewarding journey. And I think that's what writing is to me, but it's also at another level very therapeutic. When it comes to when it comes to storytelling, right? I think uh, we hear stories all the time, but I think we just don't recognize them as stories. So the essence of good conversation is storytelling. I'm sure we all have that one friend who has the best stories, right? So when you meet them for dinner, you're completely in splits because they're telling you these things, and it could be like very mundane things, but it's just the way that they tell it to you, right? Like the way that they were watering the plants and had to deal with the weeds, or I don't know, like it could be something very everyday-ish, but it comes out beautifully. So then I think there is a certain alchemy where you turn this mundane event into something uh, to be noticed, and you're able to sort of evoke certain feelings, you're able to make people laugh, you're able to um, communicate in a completely different language with them. And I think as writers, we feel this pressure of uh, oh, I should have a very original idea. I need to have a story that's unique, that's never been told before. At least I felt that pressure, that, uh, oh, what if someone has already written it? Then, like, no, like, people won't enjoy what I wrote because, they've already seen it. But then I've been doing this like 1 year program at Ashoka University called the Young India Fellowship. And there we had a course on Shakespeare, and the biggest takeaway for me from that course is there is no original story. So we literally traced the origins of Romeo and Juliet and the adaptations of that play as well. And then you realize that it's everywhere, and you can tell the same story again and again and again in different versions, and they all sort of stick with you. They all have a certain power to move you, right? And I think that's the beauty of storytelling, that you can tell the same story in different ways, and it still has that like grip over you.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Closet Writer Chronicles. I'm your host Sangeeta, aka the Moody Marshmallow. You just heard our guest for today, Samyuktha Vibhu. Samyuktha is a financial planner and advisor at iThough Advisory, and she's previously been associated with Goldman Sachs. She is also an avid reader and writer who occasionally blogs and has written articles for independent publications. She is currently pursuing the Young India Fellowship at Ashoka University. On today's episode, we chat about books, films, writing, and financial literacy, and we get to know Samyuktha, aka Sam, a little better. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Closet Writer Chronicles. I have with me this week Samyuktha Vibhu, better known as Sam. Welcome to the show, Sam. So good to have you here.
Hi, Sangeeta. So good to be here finally.
Yeah, I know. We've been having a lot of back and forth on dates, and I'm so glad we're finally doing this. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. I've been really looking forward to this. Like, I think even when you started this on Instagram and you had like different people put up their poetry or whatever they were writing, it came across as a really cool idea because I feel there's this whole mass of like closet writers, right?
Yeah.
Who are just like writing and not acknowledging the fact that they're writers, or it's like this sort of like hidden talent, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that about you. So I feel like this is a great space for some of us to come out and show ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I'm hoping so. And I'm so glad that, you were one of the first few people on the Instagram series, and now we're having this conversation. So on that note, kind of to dive right in and talking about writing and creativity, what is your earliest memory of, writing? And, when did you realize that this is something you enjoyed doing?
I think my earliest memory was that like during the weekends I would go to my mom's place, and that used to be like a weekly ritual, right? So Saturday, Sunday I would spend at my grandmom's house, and I had this fascination for paper. So they would
Okay.
keep like paper for me to like uh, either write or draw, or like, I was very determined at like age 5 that I was going to be an artist when I grew up. Uh, so this was like my weekend thing. And I remember writing stories and then I would like enact them into plays for my grandparents. So I think that's probably like my earliest memory of writing. But then I think maybe a couple of years after that, like as a birthday gift, someone gave me one of those diaries which you could lock. So I felt
Okay.
like very grown up and like, oh, I have this whole secret life that no one knows about. And I think that's when I started writing regularly. And then it just kind of stayed.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I think journaling and I think keeping a diary is a thing for so many people. I've never managed to keep a diary. I've never managed to be consistent with it, but I have started maintaining a gratitude journal, which has been interesting. But yeah, that's really cool that you've kept a diary. Do you still keep a diary, if I may ask?
Yeah, I do. Like I still journal, but like you said, like I can't do it every day.
Yeah.
Um, it seems too intense, and I don't have such an interesting life that I can actually document what happens every day, right? But yeah, it's nice. Like I think that's a space where like I put down like ideas, thoughts, I think stuff that's bothering me. Like it's good to get
Okay.
it out of your system. So I think it helps in that sense. But actually, I've been like bullet journaling and I've been doing
Okay.
this thing called the artist's way. So
Okay.
both of those things together is what I'm following this year.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think journaling can be really therapeutic and cathartic if you really get into it. Because I've heard from so many people, and I've been enjoying the process of keeping a gratitude journal. But yeah, let's see how that goes. But yeah, kind of getting into that note. So, okay, you started writing with obviously keeping a diary and journaling and whatnot. But I also know you do enjoy writing fiction and short stories, and you've blogged a bit on that as well. So, I feel like every writer has like this one story, or maybe even a couple of stories that kind of stay with them and sort of even inspire them to write, and create. What are those stories for you? They can be, I mean, anything: books, films, TV shows. Were there any such stories that impacted you and stayed with you?
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, I could actually go on and on about this, but I will keep it like short to a few things. So if we're talking about books, I think maybe 3, 4 years back, I read this book called The Shadow of the Wind.
Okay.
And it's by this Spanish author called Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And
Okay.
literally, like when I was reading that book, the only feeling that I had was, oh my God, I want to write like this. Like I want to be able
Wow.
to write a sentence that sounds as beautiful as what he writes. And like I was obviously reading a translated version because I don't know Spanish. And I'm like, I can't believe that even through translation, it reads so well.
Yeah.
Um, so like kudos to the translator. Obviously, because that's a tough job, but also you can hear the author's voice, right? And that's a book that I would recommend to everybody who likes books, likes
Okay.
reading. Um, it's really wonderful, and it's part of like a set of four books. Unfortunately, Carlos Ruiz Zafón passed away a couple of years ago. Um, so I'm very like I haven't read any of the other books because I'm just saving them for like a rainy day because I know that there's not going to be like more of his works out there in the world, right? So
Yeah.
that's as far as no, I think another book that I would think that really changed me was Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott.
Okay.
Uh, so that's also sort of like a love letter to writing. And
Okay.
uh, I think that changed a lot of these notions that I had about what it was to be a writer, because you just think that good writing comes
Right.
naturally, or, at least that's the impression that I had, that like either you're born a writer or you're not, and it's not
Yeah.
really like a craft, right? But that's not true. Like, or I think that book gave me that perspective that that's just a very warped idea. And writing is like any other work, right? Like
Yeah.
you may be terrible at it, but you just have to work at it and then you get better.
True.
And so I think those two were like really important books. But movies, like I love The Prestige. Like,
Ooh, that's a good movie. Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's a great story. There's another movie which is very similar to The Prestige, which also I love. It's called The Illusionist. And I think
Okay.
in a certain sense, like while this is an unpopular opinion, I do think The Illusionist is a better movie.
Oh, okay. I've not watched it, so I can't comment. So yeah, I
You
will watch
should, you
The
should.
Illusionist and let you know about that. If listeners have any comments on this, please let us know. Write in and let us know which is a better film, The Illusionist versus The Prestige. You can tell us. We'll have a poll on this. But
Yes,
yeah,
please pick The Illusionist.
oh my God. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think, when you spoke about translations, and I very recently started reading translations like last year during lockdown. I'm reading translations more by South Asian writers. And
Oh, wow.
even like globally, I think one book that recently I read, which is a translated work, is by this Indonesian writer. It's this book called The Wandering by Intan Parmadita. She's an Indonesian writer. And it's
Okay.
a choose your own adventure book. So it was, first of all, I was just mind blown the fact that there was a book written like that in Indonesian. And then, it was translated into English. And that's what I read because I can't read Indonesian. But just the fact that, someone wrote something like that was just phenomenal. And I was going through a really bad reading slump, and that book really like helped me get out of it. For those who are interested, it's a book about this Indonesian. It's a female protagonist. She's Indonesian, and as you know, most choose your own adventure books are written in second person. So it's about this lady who gets a pair of red shoes from the devil, and she can choose where to go with it. And you choose like as you go, like where you want to go with the shoes. So it's
Oh
really,
my God, I want to read this book now.
yeah,
Like,
you should.
really.
You should. I thought it was really mind blowing just for the fact that she talks about issues like immigration and, like racism and like being a minority, going to another country, and how she feels like an outsider in her own culture. And it's really fascinating, I thought. And the writing style, I think, is just incredible. So yeah, go read the book. I will stop, fangirling about this book now. But yeah, like as you know, like I think just writers and stories have that impact. And yeah, it's great that you're reading translated work, which I think is amazing, and I think more people should, for sure. But on that note, do you think with the whole content thing, and I think more and more writers coming up right now, thanks to social media and just the power of technology, how important do you think it is to be a reader, to be a writer?
I think you definitely, um, I think you have to read at a certain level,
Hmm.
because uh, there's no way to be a writer, right? I mean, you can't do a course and then you don't become a writer like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of writing is through observation,
Hmm.
and like it's kind of like, how previously you used to have oral traditions where you taught things and you learned uh, from other people. Like I think the way to learn from other people in writing is to actually just read, right? You see good writing, you're observant about what makes it good. Is it the rhythm? Is it the choice of words? How are they describing certain things? Uh, how are they conveying certain emotions, right? Like I think when you look at film, you can clearly see a person's like uh, face or understand their expressions, and that's a certain kind of language, but you don't have that in writing, right?
True.
And the way a screenplay is written is very different from the way a book is written. So
Right.
whatever kind of writer you want to be, like for example, like in your screenplays you can't have thoughts written there, right? Like it just doesn't translate. And if you've seen like movies versus books, like that debate is about how you're actually able to like bridge both of those worlds, right? Because it may be the same story, but like you have to deliver it in two completely different ways. So you do have to read. But that being said, I don't think it's a hard stop. Like if you still want to write and you don't want to read, you are going to miss out on some fantastic resources that would help you grow.
Yeah.
But like I said, a lot of writing is about being observant, understanding how people are, or
Yeah.
having like an imagination, or being able to see the potential of a story. So if you're able to really like hone that craft without reading from other people and then being able to write your own pieces, that's possible. Like I wouldn't shut that door and say it's impossible to be a writer without being a reader, but it
Yeah.
definitely makes it much easier if you are a reader, because I mean it's a wonderful thing to do anyway,
Yeah,
right?
it's true. No, I completely agree because when I feel like I have a very hybrid opinion on this, that, I feel like anyone can write, but I think if you want to take writing seriously and you really want to like improve and work on yourself, I think reading is one of the best things you can do, because just the fact that you're exposed to so many different styles of writing, so many kinds of writing, and so many voices, and it kind of helps you find your own voice, just kind of absorbing all this kind of information and content, which, and
Exactly.
it's a beautiful thing to do, to read. I think any reader will agree that, I think what reading can do for someone is just incredible. You're just transported to different worlds, to different ideas, different characters. And the way I think these writers think is also just, it's amazing, because you get like different worldviews also, which is incredible. And kind of just to pivot from what you said, since we were talking about like books and films, what is your opinion on book to screen adaptations? That's been happening a lot actually recently now. I mean, it's always been there, but I feel like it's been happening more now.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't watch that many movies.
Oh,
Or
okay.
because for me, like I've been working for a while. I mean, this is like my break year, but it was always like a direct trade-off, right? Like when you come home in the evening, what is that thing that you want to do to like unwind? Do you want to read? Do you want to watch something uh, on TV, like whether it's on Netflix or like a movie or whatever? So I feel like that has kind of like pushed me or nudged me towards reading, especially
Yeah.
because like I'm generally like using a screen at work,
Hmm.
and then I kind of want something different when I come home, right? So that like separation helps. But I think that we are getting better and better with like screen adaptations. So I
Okay.
remember feeling very like outraged as a kid when they made the Harry Potter movies, because I'd be like, oh, you didn't stick to the book here, you deviated from the book there, and we'll be like, how could you do that? That's sacrilegious. But um, I think now maybe I've also changed. Like it's not just about how people are perceiving books, but I do feel like you're able to convey a lot more on film than you were previously.
Hmm.
Um, and some adaptations work, some don't, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Like I can't blanket say the book was better every time.
Yeah.
I can only say the book was different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, because I think books are like, you can essentially, because every reader interprets it differently. Whereas I feel like film or a TV show or web series is like such a fixed interpretation because it's by one person, right? It's the director or writer of that show or film,
Yeah.
and you're looking at their interpretation of it, and it's like, oh, this is not how I imagined it when I read the book. So I think there's always that internal conflict. But yeah, I think Harry Potter is a big one I've gotten. There was another guest I was talking to, Indra Reddy, and she was like, it would have worked so much better if it was like a TV series, which I think would be great. I think if anyone's listening, they should actually make it a web show, because there's so much they can take from the books and like adapt
Yeah,
it properly.
I think that's what they're doing with Wheel of Time, right? Because that
Yeah.
series is just like, I mean, I didn't even flow through it. Like, I think I made it through like 4 or 5 books, and then I was like, oh, this is a lot to pack in. But it's good writing. It's like, you have great characters, and
Yeah.
I think it's just like a very intricate like story arc as well.
Hmm.
Uh, but you're right that that is probably going to work really well as a TV series because there's so much that you can show and there's so much that you
Definitely.
can take away, and having that as like episodes makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, even just what they tried to do with Lemony Snicket's, series of
Right.
unfortunate events. And now a lot of the Rings is coming out with a TV. I mean, the films itself are incredibly long, and now they're doing like a full on web show with it, which I think will be very interesting to watch. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting space, I think, today with book to screen adaptations, especially with more and more source material being books that are being converted to screenplays now.
Yeah.
It's definitely exciting, and I think it's more opportunities for writers for sure in that space.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, kind of shifting gears a little bit and talking about your actual day job, because I know you work in finance, which is, I know when a lot of people hear this, it's like, wait, how do you do a corporate job like finance and then get into something creative like writing, or balance the two? Because I know there's
Yeah.
always this like conflict or like of opinion over there with, backgrounds like this. But I find it really fascinating that you are in finance, and you're in finance by choice. It's not like you're there like because you don't have a choice. You're very much there because you enjoy the subject, which I think is like super, which I find super curious, and which is what I want to ask about. How did you decide to, get into finance, and how did that pan out for you?
Okay, so like I think my decision making was very random, and I have to like attribute some of this to luck.
Okay.
Um, because I had no interest in sort of like being in finance. Okay, like to be
Oh,
honest,
okay.
like I studied science in school. I was pretty sure that I was going to be a scientist when I grew up. I didn't want to be an engineer. That much I was very clear about. But then when I got to college, I kind of realized that amongst all the sciences, I really liked math the most. And so I ended up studying math, right? And I think during my first year of college, I met a bunch of like seniors from like economics, and they had gone for this like internship with Goldman Sachs.
Okay.
And they were just like very adamant that I apply when it's time to apply. And I was like, but I don't know anything about money. Uh, I only know about like the subprime mortgage crisis, and that does not paint like a very good picture about what you're proposing to me, right? So then I interned with Goldman. I got a full-time job, and at that point, like I was still very confused about what to do next. And I think this
Okay.
is pretty much every 20-year-old goes through, right? Like when you're in that last year of like your undergrad, you're kind of like, oh, what do I do next? Should I get a job? Should I study? But I was very like non-committal about a lot of things, and I was like, I'll just go wherever things take me. And then after about like a year of working at Goldman, like the thing that kind of like was nagging at me a little bit was that, of course, like now I was earning money and all of that, but I just didn't know what to do with it, right?
Okay.
And I didn't even want to like really like look at my taxes or acknowledge that these were things that I needed to be responsible about.
Yeah.
And I would just like sort of outsource everything to my dad. And then I'm like, come on, you're 21, like you can't behave like this. Uh, so that's when I found the job that I'm at now, which is like basically I'm an investment advisor. So I got into this thing of like, okay, at least learn for yourself. Like that was where I was sort of starting out, like be a little responsible. This is an important like adult life skill that you
Right.
need to know. And then I didn't expect to enjoy it. Like to be honest, like I just thought that, I'm not really a finance person, I was like really, really scared of like doing anything with my money. Like I would just leave it in my bank account and be like, you can be here. As long as I see you, it's good. But then I think like as I got into it, I realized that that's a very normal reaction that most people have. You are a little bit afraid of making decisions with your money, but at the same time, it's important that you get over that fear, you get out of your shell and look at doing things, and that you're going to need money for a lot of things that you want to do in your life, right?
Right.
Um, and I think there, like, I started building a better relationship with my personal finances.
Okay.
And then like, I was also working with clients, and then I understood that, okay, this is how other people feel about certain things. These are the things that you need to watch out for. These are the kind of like pitfalls that you have. And surprisingly, a lot of it is not very technical, right? It's very personal. There's a lot of behavior, there's a lot of psychology. And I think understanding those elements as much as understanding how markets work, how,
Right.
what kind of investments to choose, how you should structure your portfolio, those are important questions too. But like, you need to sort of marry both of those ideologies.
Oh, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And yeah, I think you're right. I don't think a lot of people see it that way, because I think the minute you mention finance or money, there's a lot of fear, I think a lot of people have
Yeah,
when this
definitely.
subject, when the subject comes up, and it's like, oh, okay, but talking about that, because I know financial literacy is something you're very like, you're quite passionate about, and I've seen you really advocate about it,
Definitely.
in so many places. But what is the biggest, or what are some of the biggest misconceptions you see that people have about, finance and money? And how do you think like people can make themselves more aware? How can they improve their own financial literacy? And like, especially if you're starting out and you're a beginner, what are some things you can recommend?
Okay, so I think firstly, um, if you're starting out, like, you should know that you have to pay tax. If
Hmm.
you're salaried, like, figure that out. Like, you will have a session with like which your HR person organizes. So attend that. If you don't understand, like, ask questions, ask a billion questions. Make sure that they really simplify it for you and that you get what's happening. So know that. I think you should also have your emergency fund, your rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it, right? Uh, just in case you want to switch jobs, just in case you have a big expense that you didn't plan for, whatever it is, like, I think that's the most basic form of savings. And most of us have it, right? Like, you just save money and you keep it in your bank. And then, of course, buy insurance. And then you start investments. So, like, this is like the basic progression that everyone should do. So, understand how much tax you're paying, whether you're paying tax, whether there's something that you can do. Like, if you're starting out, there might be a possibility where you don't even have to pay tax, right? Depending on your income.
Right.
Uh, then you get into like your emergency fund, and then you get your insurance, and then you start your investment. So like, once you finish all the other like foundational stuff, that's when you start investing. But I feel a lot of people start at investments and then kind of work backwards to all of these things. And you
Okay.
can tell that in their financial stories, there is a little bit of a weaker foundation. There'll be a little bit of wobbling. Um, so, like, broadly, if you follow these steps, you should be fine. Choosing investments can be tough because it requires time, it requires patience, and it requires definitely expertise. So if you have all of those resources at your disposition, then go ahead and like find out what your investment style is and then take that forward by yourself. But if you don't, like, don't hold back, or don't sort of think that, okay, I'll do it by myself, and then not give it the attention and the time that it deserves, right? Just work with an advisor, work with a professional, uh, someone who fits into your budget, someone who you trust. Like, those are the most like important factors, right, that you would look out for. Because at the end of the day, like, not doing a good job of that is going to cost you on your portfolio, and you might as well like spend that money on fees, right? So it's just one of those trade-offs. So be smart about that is what I would say. I think you had also asked me like what are the biggest like misconceptions, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel I had a lot of the big misconceptions. So I think my first thing was that like it's really hard, it's really scary, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think if you have the right like ecosystem around you, you can avoid those big mistakes.
Okay.
And today, um, I think a lot more people are financially literate, and at least like the generation above us has made like mistakes. So they will tell you that, oh, like I made these decisions that didn't turn out so well. So like maybe you shouldn't do that. So I feel like finding the right people is much easier because there's so like you said, like even for writing, like there's so much like social media information. I
Right.
mean, there is misinformation as well,
Yeah.
but I think like you can find professionals, you can find people who know what they're talking about, who are willing to help, who are very professional in the way that they're doing things.
Hmm.
So that kind of opens up a lot of space for you to avoid making the big mistakes. And the earlier you get into this system of being more financially responsible, the longer it's going to work for you, right?
Right. No, for sure. But are there any like resources you'd recommend like for people to, I don't know, read or say like articles, newsletters, or even podcasts or books, which I think would be like great for someone who's just like really scared and doesn't know where to start with understanding, the basics of finance?
Oh, definitely. So I really love like Monica Halan. So
Okay.
she used to write for Live Mint,
Okay.
and she's got this book called Let's Talk Money.
Okay.
And that's like curated to an Indian audience because there are a lot of really great books out there, but I feel like they're all written like with like the US in mind. And
Hmm.
then a lot of it doesn't apply, or like for somebody who's not familiar with all of the technical terms, like it might just seem like what are they talking about? And that can be kind of off-putting. But this book is like available online everywhere. Um, then I like this American author called Morgan Housel.
Okay.
So he's written this book called The Psychology of Money, which I
Oh,
think is
okay.
like a fantastic read. Like pretty much everything he writes, like I'm a huge fan of. And it's
Hmm.
very interesting because it's not um, like you said, right? Like a lot of people have this misconception that if you are in finance, maybe you can't be a writer, you can't be creative, or your job requires you to have a certain personality which prevents you from writing.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not really true. Like, especially if you read his work, you're going to 100% uh, sort of believe that people in finance can be writers. And then, like someone who even like breaks another stereotype, and I love his newsletters, is Matt Levine.
Okay.
So he writes this daily, almost daily sort of newsletter called Money Stuff,
Okay.
right? And he's like an investment banker and a lawyer. I mean, he's neither of those things anymore, but like those are his qualifications.
Yeah.
And he gives you like financial news, mostly like from the US, but he's hilarious. So like if you think that, oh, if you're in finance and you're a writer, and so that writing is probably really serious and I'm never gonna like have like a moment of joy reading it, like read Matt Levine's newsletter. It's like you will like every day I laugh when I read it. It is slightly more, I think you need to be in the loop of what's happening in the world
Right.
to really enjoy it. But I think even if you're not, like the way he describes things or the way he describes people and like incidents, it's just great. So that's like a fun one. Maybe it won't really help you in your own investments, uh, because everything that he says is definitely not investment advice. But yeah,
No, but I think just to kind of make people, comfortable with the whole subject of finance, because I think that's the biggest thing, right, for most people, because there's so much fear. And I think that fear comes from like, oh my God, what are these terms? Like, I don't understand them. I think obviously just having that starting point of like, okay, this isn't as daunting and scary as I've made it out to be in my head. Because I think that's like the primary thing a lot of people have, because it's like the first mental block is I'm not going to get it, it's too hard, like it's not for me, this is too much of effort.
definitely.
So I think just getting over that is the first step. And I think you're right, the fact that there's so much of information out there today with regards to financial literacy, I think just kind of figuring out like, oh, okay, I'm identifying with this content and it's really helping me kind of understand stuff. And I think just making you comfortable enough to ask people questions and, find that ecosystem for yourself that, okay, this is where I can go if I have an issue. So that's very important because financial literacy is something that is super important today. And I think everyone needs to kind of start, if you haven't started, um, that getting that awareness, I think you can take that first step. It's fine. Like, if you don't know, as long as you're making the effort, you're already like ahead of the curve in terms of understanding and being more aware, for sure. But yeah, I think just the fact that you spoke about, people in finance or like serious day jobs who can't be creative, which is such a myth. I really wonder, like, is there anything then from your financial career that you then implement in your creative pursuits? Is there something from like your day job that actually influences your writing, or kind of, there's something you've learned from there that's helped with your writing or other creative pursuits?
Yeah, I feel like I've had this really big like mindset shift, like one thing that I've learned is to think long term.
Right.
Like I think when you were like in school and college, people would ask you, "Oh, what's your 5-year plan?" And it
Hmm.
seemed like such a like cheesy and like, why would you plan 5 years ahead sort of question. And I never really had like a good answer to that. But then I think like once you start working with people and you realize that, okay, like, they have responsibilities in life, they have this house, they want to pay off the loan, they have kids, they need to send them to college, or like, you want to retire, then you kind of are forced to think about like 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. Like
Right.
that becomes like a natural sort of thought process. And I feel like having done that, like having been a financial planner and an investment advisor, like thinking about those things for different people, then it's naturally come into my life as well, right?
Hmm.
If I want to be a writer, like, if I want to be published, then you don't just end up at published, right? Like there's
Yeah.
a whole journey that
Right.
takes you there. So like really being able to recognize that in between like where you are and where you want to be, there are a lot of like milestones that you need to cross. So
Right.
understanding that anything that you aspire for has like
Mm.
sub steps, right? So I
Definitely.
think that was sort of like a big takeaway from work. And the other thing is compounding, right? Like, so I think I've been investing for more than 5 years now, and
Okay.
I'm kind of like seeing that show up in a right way. And I don't think like if I had taken any other career choice like that, I would have had this experience. So the idea behind compounding is that you do a little bit, but you do it consistently and you do it uh, over a long period of time. And that works for writing too. Like you need to do just a little bit, but you need to show up every day. Like you can't expect to get
Yeah.
better without showing up. Uh, and I think that is another thing. Like any habit that you want to build or anything that you want to like really grow, it's all through compounding. It's like a little bit,
Yeah.
but it becomes a lot like over time, right?
No, I completely agree. And I think this is, again, a conversation I've had with a lot of the guests on the show where, people are like, you need to consistently show up every day and like, practice and do your bit. Because, like you said, the results only show over a period of time because you keep doing it and you keep getting better. So I completely resonate and agree with that. But, having said that, then is there anything from, say, um, writing or being creative that you've then implemented into finance the other way around as well? Has that happened?
Yeah, definitely. Like, so actually, like I was kind of also heading like our communication and digital media, like while
Okay.
I was at iThough. Um, and so like I've written a lot of blogs about like different things. We had like a newsletter that we would send out. Like I think even the more technical aspects of the market, like I have tried to like make it more accessible for other
Hmm.
people. Give them like insights into what's happening in the industry, why certain people are like thinking certain ways. Um, I think kind of translating a lot of that jargon into something that people can actually read.
Hmm.
Because when I started, like I think that's what I found overwhelming. right? Like there were all these terms that I had like no exposure to, and it just kind of felt like I don't really understand what's happening because they will use the same uh, word for like different things. They will use different words to describe the same thing, and then like unless you're an insider, you kind of feel really left out.
Right.
Uh, but then you realize that things don't have to be so complicated. Like people are just used to talking about it in a certain way, and they take it for granted that you also understand.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this whole thing of like finance is hard
Hmm.
comes from,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, like I don't understand because you've probably tried to read like a newspaper or an annual report or like a business thing,
Yeah.
and then you're just like, I don't understand anything. And then you kind of feel like, okay, I probably will never understand any of these things. But that's not true. Like you will, just give it time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree. I think just it's like with writing, right? I think it's just taking that first step, even with your financial literacy and being aware. As you just need to take that first step, as scary as it might seem, and it's only then when you gradually go ahead, you realize that it's not as bad as I made it out to be in my head. I mean, of course, you might have like these like stumbling blocks or whatever, but I think you'll get through it for sure. Everyone has their own learning curve with this. So yeah, if you're a listener who's not started your financial literacy journey yet, now might be the time to start. It's really not that bad, guys. You can take it from two people who've been really scared of numbers. Okay, so really just go for it for sure. But yeah, kind of again, shifting gears. So you have been in finance and you said you're on a gap year. And this is something I mentioned in your intro as well, that you're now currently in the Young India Fellowship program at Ashoka University, which is like this really cool multidisciplinary program, which a lot of people, I think in their 20s or even college students, I think end up taking. Can you tell us what exactly the program is and how you've been benefiting from it and what your journey has been like with YIF?
Okay, interesting question. So the YIF is like a 1 year liberal arts program, and it's structured in such a way that you get exposed to different subjects that you would not really um, have access to in most of your undergrad courses, right? Like, at least for me, like I mentioned, I studied math. I got to study a little bit of physics, one course in like economics, and one course in biology. But that was pretty much it. Like otherwise, I was in this like domain of like math and computer science, and I didn't really get to like explore other things. Um, but I feel like this course allows you to get a taste of many different subjects. So like I've had a course on literature, I've had a course on history, I've had courses on sociology. I had really interesting like computer science, political science sort of intersection course. So
Okay.
like I think that way you get exposed to a lot of things within this 1 year. But
Hmm.
it's like each class is like pretty short, like it's 4 to 6 weeks. So in that sense, uh, you don't spend a lot of time on something, but you get this sort of like gateway, like bird's eye view of like what that particular field opens out into.
Yeah.
And I think that is really helpful if you don't know what you want to pursue. Because, I mean, of course, like it doesn't mean you'll have clarity at the end of that. Like you might just be interested in a lot of things. So that's like broadly like the structure of the YF. You also get to meet like really interesting people. So I've made like a few really good friends at the YF, and they're all much younger than me. Like you said, like this is broadly like a course. I think like our average age group is like 23. So most of the people who are in the course are like between 21 to 25, and then you have, of course, people who are older as well. But uh, they're much younger than me, so I don't know how I would have met them like if I didn't go to the YF, and I'm really glad that I made those friendships. Um, but yeah, like that's broadly like what the YIF is, and I think a lot of people want to get in uh, to the program because it kind of opens up all of these other like academic experiences that you could
Right.
have. So I think like I joined the YF because one of my friends recommended it to me like a few years back. And that was right about the time that I had started this job as like a financial planner and like working in the investment advisory space. And I was just not expecting to enjoy it so much, but then like I realized that I really love what I was doing and that this is kind of like what I wanted to do for a while. And I felt like just as I was sort of understanding and being able to navigate this world was when like the YF came into the picture of my life, right? And so, and I knew I had time because you can apply, I think, until you're like 28. So I didn't want to do it like right away. But then it was one of those things that you just are like, oh, I won't do it now, I won't do it now. And then you kind of realize that, okay, maybe you should, you're running out of time and you should possibly like pursue it. And I think they also had like a critical writing program, which seemed interesting at that point. And I think given all of that, I felt like it would be like an interesting thing to pursue
Okay.
because at least for a year, like I had been looking at different master's programs. Nothing really clicked for me the way that the YIF did.
Okay.
Because I think my interests are very broad. So I didn't really want to like specialize into anything. And I've done like different like professional qualifications for work. So it didn't really make too much sense to like pursue like say a degree in like finance or like an MBA or something like that. Um, but it's been an interesting year because I think like while I came in for the writing program, I kind of realized that okay, this is not something that you would want to pick up in a classroom. Like writing is something that requires a different sort of environment, right? It's a lot of like experimenting, it's a lot of reading, like like we discussed, observing, kind of, and showing up at the table every day to write. So that's been something that I've been working on. I think that revelation only came to me like after joining the program, that this is something that I need to work on my own. Like I can have a support system, I can have the ecosystem, I have certain tools obviously to help me through all of this. But at the end of the day, like it's only about putting in the work, right? And then getting back from peers or from friends and then sort of working on that. So yeah, it's been interesting. Like I feel it's a bit difficult to like go back to college like after working for so long. Uh, yeah, I'm getting used to it. Like I feel like I have a lot more time on my hands now because I felt like work was very demanding. And the course, like I think some people do find it challenging, but like it's manageable for me. So like
Yeah.
I'm having it's like a very relaxed year.
No, that's great. I mean, the fact that you're kind of learning and still being productive, but you're also like enjoying the process of it. I think that's the most important thing, that, you are having fun while also getting what you need out of it. That's amazing. And more power to you, Sam, for like doing all these really cool things, being in finance, writing, and now YIF. It's all amazing. And yeah, now we're kind of coming towards the end of this interview, and we always end with these last two questions. So the first one being, what are your aspirations? Could be anything you're looking forward to in the near or even, distant future. Like, what is something you're looking forward to?
Okay, I'm definitely looking forward to going back to work. Like,
okay, you must be the first person to say that. I'm looking forward to get back to my job. I think this is the classic example of you should love what you do, even if it's finance. But
yeah, definitely. Like I feel people are going to judge me for that answer, but that is definitely something that I'm looking forward to. I miss like it's weird, but like I think the first couple of months into the program, I was like, I miss going to office. I miss doing this. But yeah, that's one thing. I've been like also kind of trying to start a newsletter,
Ooh,
and
fun.
I applied for like Substack Go, which is like a 4-week course with Substack where they kind of teach you how to use the platform, you sort of network with other writers, and you get together. So I applied to that. I don't know how that's going to work out, like whether they'll select me because it's like obviously like a selective process and they have a limited number of seats. But let's see. So maybe if that pans out, then I'll be doing that. But I'm definitely with or without Substack Go, like I am doing the newsletter.
That's cool.
And I will let you know once I start that.
Yes, you
Um,
should.
yeah, and I think probably in my life, my big dream is that someday I write a graphic novel.
Ooh,
And it would be fun. Yeah, like
that
that's
would be
the
really
big
fun.
dream. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely love to read that graphic novel for sure. If you give me a chance to edit it, I'll be very happy to sit in on the edit, if not
You
anything.
already know that the editor's role is for you.
Oh, great. You heard it here on the podcast first, guys. If Sam does not give me this job, I have proof. No. But
Yeah.
no, on a serious note, I'm really looking forward to reading what you churn out with the newsletter and, with the graphic novel, because I have read some of your work and you write really well. And it's very interesting. I love that you have such a fun imagination, so to speak, because I've read some of your stories. I'm going to hear some of it at the end of this episode. But yeah, more power to you, Sam. Really looking forward to all that you're going to, come out with. And yeah, last question. And yeah, last question. What is a piece of advice or learning, you'd like to share with people? Can be professional, creative, or even, personally something you've learned and you just wish that people were more aware of in life?
I think the only piece of advice that I would give people is to sort of just do different things, right? And stick with them. Because I feel like everything that you do has like a learning curve. The initial paths may not be enjoyable unless you already knew that you were interested in doing something, right? But then it gets fun after a point. Like, for example, I have like 2 left feet. And I decided I will go to dance class, right? And it was just like something that I felt like, okay, you need to do this because you've been like inside your comfort zone. You only do things that you like to do. And that's all great. But like once in a while, you should do things that you're not comfortable doing and see how that feels. And I think I was fumbling around a lot and I didn't really enjoy it initially. And I kind of felt like I was making a fool out of myself. And like kudos to my class actually, because they were like super supportive and non-judgmental, and it felt like a great place to be. But then like, within a couple of months, I was having a lot of fun. And I was like, I can't believe I didn't think of doing this earlier. And I feel a lot of us have these inhibitions, right? About things that, oh, I'm not good at cooking, or I'm not good at this, or I'm not good at that. And I won't try it because I'm not good at it. And I probably will never enjoy it. But do it. Like, do things that you don't think that you'd enjoy, because I think if you don't enjoy it, then it kind of helps you appreciate the things that you do enjoy.
True.
And if you do enjoy it, then like good for you, man. You found something else.
Yeah. No, I think that's a lovely piece of advice, and it's something I very strongly resonate with. I think it's having that constant beginner's mindset of, being okay with trying something and just being really open to it, without any expectation of, okay, let's genuinely see, let's try something and see if this is something I actually like or not, and if it's something I enjoy doing, which I think is a great way to be. And I think too many people expect instant success or gratification when they try something, which is not how it should be. I think you should just enjoy the process of learning and truly seeing if you're liking it or not. So completely agree with that piece of advice, for sure. But
definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, on that note, we have now come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much for being here, Sam. I'm so glad we did this. A lot of useful information on financial literacy, but also loved hearing about, what you're doing and what you're planning to do in the future. Can't wait to see that graphic novel come out. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I hope you had fun.
I had an amazing time. Like I'm super happy that we did this, because I know we've been talking about it for a couple of months, and like we've just been going back and forth because of ourselves. But it's good to see that it finally materialized, and I had a lot of fun, and I can't wait to hear like the other people who are on this as well. See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Thank you so much for being here. So that was my conversation with Samyuktha Vibhu. I really learned a lot about getting started with finance and investments, and I really enjoyed chatting about books, films, and different resources on financial literacy. Closing this episode with a story written and narrated by Samyuktha. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you next week with a new guest and a new chronicle to share. Talk soon!
So I'm going to read a piece which ties back to what we were talking about right at the beginning, which is like this intersection of writing, storytelling, and creativity, right? Um, the piece that I'm going to read is called Count von Emeralden and the Mystic Law. And the way I was able to sort of bring these elements together was that the inspiration for this story was actually uh, from like my Instagram account. So I had posted a story where I asked people to drop in like a word that they were thinking about or anything that just came to their mind. And then I used all of those words to sort of construct this story. And it was a super fun experience for me because the kind of things that come in are so diverse, like you really have no idea how to tie them in. Uh, but then you find a way to do it, and then it feels like a lot of fun. And then I think even for the reader to sort of like go in and see like where their word fits into this story is like a journey in itself. Anyway, I hope you have fun listening to this or reading it later. Here we go. Count von Emeralden paced up and down. From the corner of his eyes, he caught a pair of Air Jordans shuffling away. He spent a moment searching for that triangular splat of Michael Jordan until he spotted it on the tongue of the shoe. He preferred it when Jordan made an appearance on the heel tab. 2 months ago, he had celebrated a birthday, but today he felt a year older. Age was catching up with him. He defeatedly admitted to the shedding. What difference did a royal line make if he was going to look patchy and bald in his old age? Unfortunately, the baldness was the least of his problems. Horrific memories of the previous week flooded his mind. He had reasoned it out perfectly, but somehow they had managed to dupe him. He distinctly overheard the pudgy poacher say, "We'll do a surprise shipment this week." Count von Emeralden was no stranger to logical deduction. In fact, every day it was his sharp critical thinking that helped him nab the bad guys. He reasoned that the surprise shipment couldn't happen on Sunday because everybody, including the strange cargo people, took Sunday off. And it couldn't happen on a Saturday because by Friday night they would know that the surprise shipment was happening on Saturday and it would no longer be a surprise. So if it couldn't happen on Saturday, by the same logic, it couldn't take place on Friday. And if it wasn't scheduled for Friday, it certainly wouldn't be a surprise on Thursday. And through rigorous backward induction, Count von Emeralden concluded that there would be no surprise shipment that week. Unfortunately, the poacher smuggled two baby civet cats on Wednesday out of this very airport. The audacity! His peers sneered. Only the senile count could arrive at such a silly conclusion. Serendipity sympathized. They had been friends for many years now, solving crimes side by side. Her ears pricked with patience as she listened to him howl and bark. How could he have been wrong? Would he ever get a fresh start? And then she simply said, "You've been fooled by the surprise test paradox." Before she could explain further, her obsequious handler Sarah came by. She had been scratching Serendipity's ears and rolled her on her back. Serendipity delighted in the pampering, but the Count couldn't stand it. A dog should have more dignity, he insisted. Then Sarah cupped his cheeks in her hands. "Why are you looking so glum?" she asked with exaggerated disappointment. The Count maintained his poker face. "Does somebody want a treat?" she offered in a shrill voice. The Count secretly prayed that old age, deafness, and senility got to him before Sarah did. This cheerful woman had to be stopped. It was criminal to have such a broad smile in their line of business. She frequently flashed her pearly whites and let out loud laughter that caused the ringlets framing her round face to wobble. How would people look up to a giggling woman and believe that she was a crime fighter? Serendipity begged to differ. Laughing didn't diminish being a badass. She purred like a satisfied cat. It was too much work. The Count could take it no more. He let out a disgruntled bark. Serendipity shot him a dark look.